Hello everyone, Tracie here. I can't believe it's going to be 2020. I remember I thought, gosh, how old am I going to be when the year turns to the year 2000? And that was like 20 years ago, like the big 36 was old. Anyway, so happy holidays. Today, we're going to talk about expectations. And expectations has a lot to do with non-attachment. Non-attachment is sometimes hard to grasp of what exactly that is. But I think it's really important because it leads us to a place of peace and being okay with whatever happens, which is pretty huge because it has everything to do with our happiness. So we're going to dive into expectations, why we have them and why we shouldn't. So we wouldn't hold expectations if we knew that it was going to set us up for disappointments. So there's something beneficial to know about expectations. Is a lot of us believe that our source of happiness is outside ourselves. We don't fully understand that we actually hold in mind, or the way that we frame something to be sets us up to feel that disappointment. And when you're feeling disappointment, you can't feel joy. If expectations were about other people or circumstances and situations, then it would be impossible to control it. But because expectations are about us and about what we are holding in mind, then we can control that. We can change that. We can hold in mind that we will be happy or joyful no matter what. It's possible to see a thing as it is, or call a spade a spade. Let's say Uncle Bobby is going to show up for your Christmas event and he usually gets drunk. So to hold in mind that he shouldn't is going to set yourself up for a disappointment if Uncle Bobby gets drunk, which most likely he will. Expectations are a form of dependency. It's a powerless position in which we are holding in mind that our happiness is dependent on Uncle Bobby not getting drunk. And if he does get drunk, then we are going to react and feel bad. So a lot of times, instead of holding ourselves responsible to change what we're holding in mind, we will depend on someone else's behavior in order for us to feel good, which is a powerless position. The thing about expectations is we hold in mind that there's only one outcome. And that's the outcome that we're holding in mind that should be. And if it doesn't turn out that way, then we react to that. But we think it's the circumstance we're reacting to, and it's really what we're holding in mind on how we believe things should be. It's kind of like controlling everybody and expecting them to perform to, how we choreographed this circumstance. The first step in expectations is realizing that we're holding them. Because if there's no awareness, then you can't change what you're holding in mind. We have a tendency to think in terms of form instead of formless. If I say the thing's going on inside me, then that would be using my body as a reference. So anything that's not going on in here is out there. So this would be subjective and that would be objective. It's also hard to hear something like we are all one when you're looking at the world of form, because certainly my body is not your body, and if someone slaps me, you're not going to get hurt. But it's talking about consciousness, and in the world of consciousness, there are no new stressful thoughts. So we all tap into the field and attract to us thoughts. And then depending on what we believe about those thoughts, that will be the feelings. So if you're holding something in mind opposite of what reality is telling you, of course you're going to feel resistance to that. And closer to the truth is, we don't know how things are going to turn out. Most of us aren't psychic, and even those people that are wrong like 80% of the time. So it's just a guess. So we don't know how things are going to unfold. So to plan it all in our head and expect that it unfolds that way is, delusional. And really, the only reason that we want things to unfold in a certain way is because we want to feel good. When we have an emotional balance and we're able to understand the difference between reality and imagination, or delusion, illusion, then we don't hold these things in mind because they no longer fit our paradigm. So if I don't know how things are going to unfold, and I don't, and I don't think you do either, then why would I hold something in mind that things should be a certain way when I know that I don't know? So already I'm jumping into a situation in my head where I want things to go a certain way so that I will feel good, which of course sets me up as powerless in a position where most likely I'm going to react because everything isn't going to go according to the way that I plan it in my head. So the next question would be, then how can I feel good regardless of what happens or how things unfold? How is it that I can feel good? And the answer to that is I have to be aware of all of my expectations of how I want things to be a certain way. Because when I hold that in mind and they don't turn out that way, I'm not going to feel good about it. So to be aware of that and then to change my expectations so that I have none. It sounds pretty hard, but it's actually easy. I don't know how people can get to happiness or to tap into that joy while they're holding in mind that something that is shouldn't be. It just, because what is. And of course it is, but we don't want to have to react to everything. We don't have to want to react to Uncle Bobby getting drunk, right? What does that have to do with us? He's the one drunk. The mind has this, at the depth isn't the deepest part of our being, but at the depth of the core of the ego is narcissistic, and it believes that it knows how things should and shouldn't be. And it superimposes that knowing onto the world. According to me, there's never a right time that someone should die. Because if I'm holding in mind that people shouldn't die, then anyone that dies is never going to die in the right time, according to me. So there's always going to be the grief that comes up around that. So even to be in a place where you're non-attached about death, that means you're accepting and you're not reacting. You would have to go into all of those beliefs that one would have around death. What does that mean? Where do you go? What happens? What about that loss? Is the loss of the body the loss of life? Is it the loss of consciousness? And all of that. So you can see there's a lot of work, and the work is so worth it because you can't, everybody's looking for happiness, but they think that it's going to be in a circumstance or in the future, or if they get something that they want. And ultimately it's been in us all along, and it's more of an undoing than it is about a getting. So when we undo all the blocks to joy, what remains is joy. The truth is that nobody likes to be told what to do. You're not the boss of me. And we feel disrespected when somebody tells us as adults what to do, how to do it, and when to do it. And when we conform, we feel, especially for something we didn't want to do, we feel powerless. And yet, in our mind, we do the same thing. We may not say it, but we hold it in mind that other people should do what we think they should do, and how they should do it, and when they should do it. But we don't like when it's done to us. And so that is certainly not the way to be bossy of each other and tell each other how we should act and what is right and who gets to hold that moral compass on how people should behave. And do you know the reason that people harm other people anyway is because they're in pain, and they're in pain mostly because they're holding expectations. Happy, joyful people don't hurt other people, nor are they intrusive into their life, and they're not controlling, and they're not dictators. And so that's why it's so important to find our joy, so that we can be compassionate towards each other and support each other instead of dictating how other people should and shouldn't be, so that I, in a dependent, powerless position, will feel good, because there's no other way for me to feel good unless you act the way in which I think you should, which is all backwards. It's all backwards. We want to get empowered and be free to act and say and do the things that we feel are appropriate. And I think we have a good idea of what is kind, and really the law basically says harm no one or their property. all these other rules and statutes and regulations are all built around control, and they really don't work. Another thing about expectations is conforming to someone else's expectations of what they have about you. And a lot of times we don't want to hurt them or have them feel a certain way, so we go ahead and conform. But ultimately, we're not responsible for other people's insecurity, because insecurity comes from their mind just like it comes from our mind. And so if it doesn't feel right, it goes against your integrity to have to conform to someone else's expectations. And so that doesn't work either. And when we're in a state of balance, we can just calmly state our truth to someone without having to, create a fight or an argument. We just calmly speak our truth. It's time for Uncle Bobby to leave or something along those lines, without, holding all these expectations and tell everyone how bad they are and how they went against all of your expectations. So this leads me to mostly about non-attachment. So I'm non-attached to what the mind says. So I can attract a lot of expectations to myself, but if I don't believe them, I'm not going to react. I am only going to react to expectations if I believe that they're true. So they can pass through me, thoughts can pass through me without me reacting. So I could have a thought, let's say in the middle of Christmas Eve, oh my God, Uncle Bobby shouldn't be drinking that much. But the reality is, he is. And when the thought passes through me, I no longer react or hold the opposite view that he shouldn't be drinking that much, when in fact he is. So I am able to be non-attached to my own thoughts, non-attached to the outcome of how things should be. Those are all powerless positions that leave me dependent. I will be codependent, like I said in the beginning, about circumstances going a certain way, people acting, saying, speaking, looking a certain way, in order so that I feel good. And that's going to keep me powerless. So I want to be empowered, and I want to be able to share my truth, and I want to have a joyful time. Sometimes, things happen and we're able to accept it. We're certainly not joyful about it, but we accept that it happened, and we're not reacting. We're not going into a big grief cycle. We're not throwing a temper tantrum, and we're not yelling and screaming that things didn't turn out our way. We're balanced emotionally for the most part, and we adjust to whatever seemed to happen that wasn't as pleasant as, as it could have been if people were all joyful. And because certainly there's going to be pain bodies, especially around the holidays, because there's a lot of projecting of how things should be. So we feel depressed, sad, especially when you hold in mind that Christmas is a time of joy and everything should just unfold in this miraculous kind of way where everyone's feeling the spirit. And most, it's like, projecting glamour onto a Christmas, thinking, yeah, this isn't the Waltons or the Brady Bunch. This is real life where stuff comes up. And if it didn't come up, we wouldn't even know we're holding expectations. We wouldn't know that we could make any changes. And I think it's real important for things to come into our awareness, even if it's at Christmas time or any other time, so that we can adjust what we're holding in mind. Because what we're holding in mind is always setting us up. Anyway, happy holidays, and may you be non-attached to whether Uncle Bobby gets drunk, or there's Uncle Bobby shows up, or if there's even an Uncle Bobby in your life. And I wish you the happiest of days. Peace to you.